Did these bottles from the local Goodwill as well as an estate sale. And I thrifted them specifically for the Harvest Spirit Challenge hosted by the Flippin Bunch. Mara over at Borderline Furniture RX came up with this great collab idea where we take bottles and give them a fall style new look. I'm going to work on these bottles all at the same time and give them a very cohesive look. I cleaned all of the bottles really well with some soap and water, and then I'm giving them a good thick coat of this General Finishes milk paint in the color called Alabaster. I want a little bit of a texture, so I'm okay with the thick finish and the brush strokes. I'm going to do 2 full coats on all 3 of these pieces. Now this milk paint is kind of old and it's kind of chunky. It's got a lot of like particles that have fallen in it, but I am okay with that. It's just going to add to my textured look overall. Once my base coat of my milk paint is all dry, I'm going to take these babies outside and spray them down with some of this aqua colored spray paint. On the biggest bottle, I'm going to add a trimmed label type look to it. So I'm using some air dry clay and this little mold, and I'm filling the mold with the clay. And then I'm gonna kind of very carefully bend my molds in half and kind of gently pull out my mold that I created to try not to remove any of those little details that I get from the mold. I'm using this E6000 glue, and that is how I will adhere my mold trim pieces to this bottle. When working on these curved surfaces, I like to keep my clay in a wet state so it's easier to bend around the curves. The air dry clay often does shrink once it starts to dry, so I do try and make sure I have everything fit in there nice and snug. That way, if there is some shrinkage, there's not any gaps in between my areas of molds that I have kind of pieced together. Using this farmhouse chalk paint color called Agave, I'm going to lightly dry brush all of the surfaces of all 3 of the bottles, including on the mold trim that I applied to the largest bottle. When that application of chalk paint was dry, I'm going to take some Waverly brand chalk paint in the color called ink with a flat ended artist brush, and I'm going to apply that into the label area on this bottle. When that was dry, I added some chalkboard paint over top of the black Waverly chalk paint. I had these really cute fall transfers in my stash, and I'm going to apply this wreath to my middle sized bottle. I'm finding the middle, and then I'm going to take my burnishing stick and I'm going to rub on this transfer until the transfer releases from the clear transfer paper. Once it's completely released from the transfer paper, I just take my fingers and I gently rub around the transfer to remove any halos that are around the image. I chose this little floral arrangement for my smallest bottle, which is a milk bottle, and then I do the same process with my transfer burnishing stick. I just rub it until it releases from the transfer paper. I felt like I still needed something on these bottles, so I added some of this twine with some greenery and some vintage ribbon and made a pretty little bow. So far, I'm really loving the non-traditional colors that I'm using for these bottles than your typical fall yellows and oranges. I had a small piece of this white vintage lace, so I added that to my middle-sized jug. And then with my largest bottle, I'm adding some of that twine with the greenery. For my chalkboard label, I'm trying to figure out how I want to write out my label, and it's going to say Turkey Fund. So I worked on this for quite a while till I finally got my design to my liking. And that's definitely the nice thing about chalk is it's easy to erase to fix any mistakes you might make. Ended up loving the way it all turned out in the end. I went outside and I cut some of my dried flowers off of my hydrangea plants and I used them in the milk bottle to create this beautiful floral arrangement. Let's check out the final results of my bottle flip. I hope you all love them and my non-traditional color choice on my bottles. Remember to check out the playlist. There's tons of inspiration there as well. I will have that linked on the end screen as well as in the description box. Hopefully, I get a viral amount of views and I can fill this turkey fund jug up with money. Thank you all so much for watching and I hope you have a great day. I'm grateful for all of you during this fall season for always supporting me and watching my videos, liking them, and commenting down below. You all are the best. Thanks again, you guys. Have a great day. Bye.